BP's loss is enormous, or Anadarko for that matter. But on top of that, you actually might get your whole license revoked to actually operate in an area. So I think that's also shifted the burden of proof to some degree between the industry and the people who advocate a cautious approach. And I think it's interesting to put that as a subtext to the discussion we have. The other small issue I wanted to raise is the fact that IUCN in this capacity has really tried to provide a fair and sort of objective platform. So what we've tried to do is not be the experts, but be the facilitator. Now, that can be hard for a group which is, has lots of scientists and often have a feeling that we know well also what should be done. But from our perspective, it was really important that we've tried to be as even-handed between the company and the panel as we can, so that both parties feel comfortable and feel that there's a sort of mutual trust in how we go about this. That meant we were perhaps a little bit more, should we say, bureaucratic or formalistic or ritual in our behavior, but I think overall that's helped. And this was partly also, I think, a function of many of our members who were very cautious about this relationship. So in the early days of it, there was a lot of opposition to the idea that IUCN should engage with this type of process at all, and there was, I think, a skepticism that there would be a genuine will on either side to engage in it. So I think our judgment of this is that by and large it's worked reasonably well. However, there are always scope for improvement. We did do a very serious midterm evaluation. We did a final evaluation of the first phase, so there has been I think an attempt to improve on our processes and learn from them. And I think that's also important that we continue to look at advice from other panels to see how we can improve the way we do it. Another interesting point here is also perhaps looking at the 350 recommendations. Now that does sound rather ambitious. It's important to say that sometimes there are annual recommendations that pertain to specific activities that are happening during the period when you're working during the summer. So it's perhaps not quite as, they're somewhat repetitive in the sense that they happen every year. So if you look at them as completely different types of activities, they clearly wouldn't count to that type of number. And I think that perhaps could scare any other company that might consider going down this path if you have 350 things you need to be accountable for and you're counting and they keep on adding all the time. So I think it's important to see them more as, it's an ongoing operational thing when you're done with the construction phase, and that I think is quite interesting.
Let me interrupt you. It's hard to interrupt you.
I know that.
And you reminded me about the fact of the evaluation. I did not mention that when talking to Alexi, I don't think, but there is this IUCN required every 2 years a formal evaluation of the panel, how it's going, how it can be improved by an external person. That's one thing, and there's also a requirement that at each of our meetings, I'm not sure that's in the new terms of reference for the next 5 years, but that we do a self-evaluation and that's part of our report. But the other thing I want to mention is that some of those recommendations, that forbiddingly long list, some of them are made to IUCN, that is the panel's making a recommendation to IUCN. Some are directed at the panel itself, oddly enough, that someone needs to do something, and some of them are to the industry generally, so they're not so specific to IUCN. I mean, most are to SASE. Most of them are to Samsung Energy, but it's a little bit inflated to imply that they're all directed at this one company.
Right, so with all those small caveats, I open the floor. Any comments, suggestions, thoughts, criticisms, shocks? Tatiana?
Should I actually come up here?
Yeah, no, we're going to sit here. This is definitely the general discussion.
This is general. Is it general?
It's up to you. I mean, you can stand and move around if you want to.
I would like to ask a provocative question. We have seen that there are only few of these whales, and of course, for all of us conservationists, it's quite clear why we need to protect them. And you both talked about range-wide conservation measures which are needed. So, and for us it's very clear that we do need these measures. But on the other hand, if you go and talk to the states, what do you tell them? These whales have no economic value. You cannot eat them, so they don't contribute to people's livelihood. And I would dare to say that fishermen look at them as a nuisance because they mess with their set nets and they die, and fishermen have to report the death. So what kind of arguments would you use if you talk to the government, to the range-wide government? How do you persuade them to protect these whales? Thank you. And I would like to hear answer also from Alexei and from the chair.
Yeah, well, obviously, we're talking about different range states here, and it's not all exactly the same. These whales are part of a, some of the whales, those that go to the east, are part of a migration that's highly valued aesthetically and economically and legislatively, if you will, in the United States, to a less extent in Canada, very much so in Mexico. So the case has already been made there, and they're quite protective of gray whales generally, and immediately, now that we know some of the animals are from this western population, from one of the western populations, whatever you want to call it, you can be sure that there will be lots of pressure from NGOs and governments themselves to make sure those animals are protected. In fact, it's come up as part of the discussion of the resumption of whaling by the Makah people in the state of Washington, who have a historic treaty right to hunt for whales, and they have been negotiating with the U.S. government and the International Whaling Commission to get a very small quota. And now, knowing that some of the animals that swim by their territory and are potentially going to be hunted are western gray whales, that's a complicating factor in that discussion. And I don't want to get into the other, there's another population in the middle of all this that's called the Pacific Coast Feeding Aggregation, which has meant that the Makah are potentially going to be at risk of injuring or killing whales from 3 different populations, and we have to try to craft a management plan for that hunting so that the possibility of one of these whales from another area than the main migrating population in the east is, we want to make sure that none of those from the other ones are hunted. So I'm getting a little bit off track here. I should also mention that you say that these whales are a nuisance to fishing inmates. It really depends on which fishermen you're talking about, because in Japan, and I think, well, not in Korea these days, but certainly for catching minke whales in Korea, for example, the whales are not a nuisance. They're a welcome thing in the traps and nets because they're worth a lot of money, and that's true in Japan too. So while you might think that whales damaging some kinds of fishing gear is a problem to fishermen, well, it depends on the context, and it's not straightforward. Do you want Alexia to say something? Maybe Bob could say something too.
Otherwise, we have another comment.
Here's a question.
Hi, my name is Shingo Uta from the Fisheries Agency of Japan, and fortunately or unfortunately, I have never been involved in whaling issue in the agency, but I quickly checked to our website and how the Fisheries Agency has been tackling the bycatch by setnet in the Japanese coastal waters. And according to the information I got, in 2007 IWC meeting, it was pointed out that Japanese coastal setnet by boat four gray whales between 2005 and 2007. And IWC recommended, actually urged Japan to take measures to improve the situation. Then upon this recommendation, we actually took several measures. One is, we informed, the fishermen and also prefectural governments that gray whale and barbed whales are critically endangered species. So when those species entered into a set net, they should be released as much as possible. And also, we changed the internal regulation so that the possession and sale of gray whale, even when it is bycatch, it is a bycatch product by set net, we prohibit possession and sale of gray whales, so that there would be no incentive for fishermen to utilize bycatch of gray whales. And also, we, 4 years ago, we had a meeting, internal meeting, inviting all those prefectural officials and to explain, how to avoid the bycatch of gray whales, and also, when the gray whales are incidentally caught, what kind of steps should be taken by fishermen and the prefectural governments. So through those actions, we have been trying to reduce as much as possible incidental take of gray whales by setting. Just for information.
Yeah, no, that's important to point that out. I think we have to credit the Japanese for taking those positive steps, and I think they have been positive. The fact that there have not been any documented captures since 2007 may be completely unrelated to that work, but it may be in some way related to that. I'm not sure exactly how a fisherman can avoid gray whale entering his set net. It's just
They can't avoid. They need to make efforts to release.
To release, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Set net is set net, it's not an active fishing gear, it's a passive fishing gear.
Right. So it's there, and the whale will either go in or not. But I don't think there's been any record, at least, of a gray whale entering the set net and being released successfully since 2007. Am I right about that?
I have no information.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a record of a humpback and a minke whale released from set net in Japan, but no gray whale.
Was that recent, or that sort of
Within the last few years? Yeah. Yeah. But also, the gray whale in set net is very rare compared to a minke whale.
Yeah, but they're not required. As the regulation that he read referred to gray and bowhead whales only, right?
Yes, but
Gray and right whales.
gray and bowed whales, yes.
Yeah, you said
yes.
bowhead. So minkies and
It means
humpbacks.
bowhead too. It means bowhead.
Yeah. But the why did they release the humpback and the minke? That's my question.
The local fishermen were interested for whatever reason to try and release it.
Okay.
So it is possible. So that's good.
Yeah.
So maybe we should also get back a little bit more to the panel and its modality. I think it's one of the reasons we wanted to have this here at the Congress was to give people who are interested in other types of developments an opportunity to perhaps ask questions. As we all know, there's a lot of interest from various types of industries to expand activities in the Arctic right now. And IUCN is being approached quite actively by some industry groups to consider another set of panels, or one specific panel perhaps, regarding Arctic developments. Wherever we get involved in something like this, we will obviously try to consult with our membership, and one of the features we heard about here is the fact that we have observers from our members, and it's very important to us that we have sort of a unified understanding of why we get into these type of things and the types of benefits and the types of risks that are associated with these type of panels. So I thought maybe I could put that to you as well, if there are aspects to these panels that you would like to understand better or that you have concerns about. This is an opportunity for you to weather those type of questions. If you want to introduce yourself and perhaps go up to the microphone.
My My name is Mark King. I'm Director of Project Oversight at the European Bank. We were one of the funders of Sakhalin Energy for the first phase of the project, and we were involved in the consideration of phase 2, and we didn't finance in the end because of political reasons with Gazprom coming into the project. For us, it was a very successful venture, the establishment of the wigwag process. And it's one that we try to repeat for a number of other types of projects, particularly mining projects and wind farms, where we've engaged with species experts related to birds, bats, and also with FFI and a few other groups. We're looking at the Mongolian wild ass, the Umbara bustard, 2 birds present in one of our Mongolian projects. So it's a very good model. The independence element, I think, is extremely important. The ability of the experts to be hired separately, to report separately, be able to carry out their work in an objective, scientific manner without any interference whatsoever. What sometimes can happen, and I'm not saying this happened at all with regards to the panel, but what can sometimes happen is difficulties in reconciling the time frames, as it were, of the lenders and the project developers, who are usually on a very tight time frame, with the ongoing work of species experts, who might be out in the field studying this, that, and the other, and trying to get people together and convene groups to look at issues, getting experts to review a report tomorrow because it suits the needs of the lenders and project development is a problem. Well, it's not a problem for the species experts, but it can be a problem for the lenders. So there is this issue of reconciling timeframes, but certainly from our perspective, the model was a very, very successful one.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for reminding me of those days when, in fact, how easily one forgets all the stress involved, the kind of time we felt. I know for the independent scientific review panel in the first 8 months or so, we felt like we were just being steamrolled and forced to go way beyond what we were able to, given the time available and the information before us. And it was this constant pressure because the company had decided that in 2005 summer construction was going to begin. It was 2005 or 2006. Anyway, those years, the company makes a decision it's going to do something and then says, okay, now tell us it's okay. I mean, that's sort of the way we were feeling at the time. And that's a real potential problem. One of the interesting things, the reason I'm forgetting about it is that in recent times, as Alexei said, we've had 2 postponements of seismic surveys by this company as a result, partly at least, of the panel's discomfort with the rate at which they were going. So I mean, that's a good thing. I think it slowed down and said, okay, we'll swallow the investment that we've made in this and prolong it for a year. It's not easy either, I think, from the standpoint of just people's spirit, but also economically for the company to do that, to postpone. But they did. But the interesting thing for me is that I thought we were in a mode now of just operation without any sort of new activity coming on the scene to worry about. And then all of a sudden we learned that, in fact, the company's thinking very seriously about another platform, which puts us way back to where we were before. Fortunately, in this case, the panel is in place, has a history, and we're involved in discussions with the company way earlier than we were with the previous platform. But there's still this frustration that, in fact, no, things are not just going to stay the way they are for years and years, and until the field is depleted. Suddenly we have a new development facing us to look at and argue about. So, you want us to say anything about this?
Yeah.
You have your own perspective.
That's okay. I can use this. It's clear that, of course, business and like conservation and scientists, of course, have different perspectives. So for the scientists, it's extremely important to get as much information as they can about the subject, about the object, about particularly in this situation about the gray whales. For the business, the key importance is the case. So, okay, we will do it, but what is the reason for us to do it? So how it will help us to mitigate our risk? Is there any risk actually? And how we will use it in the future? So, of course, the process didn't go like smoothly in the beginning. So many other companies were thinking, well, that Sakhalin Energy is stupid. They're creating independent panel which will like challenge probably potentially the company. And of course, as Karl said, there was a lot of disagreement in IUCN, but also there was a lot of different thinking in the company about this process. But after 10 years, we can justify that it's a very good investment because first, as I already mentioned, that we don't have expertise to take the decision